Welcome to this special episode of Hanging in My Tree, which honours those in our family who have served in the wars, particularly World War I and World War II. I certainly don't want to glorify war, and if I had my wish, my children and grandchildren would never have to serve. But I am acutely aware of the injustices that have taken place in the world in the past, with my Polish grandfather being a prisoner of war in Germany, and the atrocities that are still taking place today. And these young men and women sacrificed their lives, their mental health and their physical health to fight for something that they believed in. Until I started this video, I had no idea of the number of relatives who served in World War I and particularly World War II across both the RAF and the Army and the various roles in which they played. In order to try and honour and remember those in our family who've served, I've tried to find a photograph of them in their military uniform and a photograph, if I could, in their life either before or after the war. There is a little bit of information about where they were born, where they died, and a little tiny bit of information about their military service. If you are interested in finding out more about family members who've served in Australia, the National Archives have a copy of their military records.
My apologies to family members if I've got any of the details wrong. I haven't done the deep dive that I would normally do when undertaking a video. So let's start at World War I with Private Albert Gustav Farquhar, who was born on the 9th of March 1887 in Jacksonville, Tasmania, and who was killed in action at age 29 years on the 22nd of July 1916 in France. He was part of the 1st Infantry Battalion. There is a letter from his brother, Robert Farquhar. The letter confirms that both of Albert's parents had already died and that he was the eldest brother left. There is a photograph of Albert with his brothers before the war. Next, from World War I, is Albert John Farquhar, who was a driver during the war. He was born on the 5th of January 1894 in Strand, Tasmania. He was in the Field Artillery Brigades, the 11th Reinforcements, and he returned to Australia medically unfit. He died in Scottsdale on the 3rd of October 1944. Albert was a police officer in his home in Tasmania. In August 1918, during the war, he developed vomiting and pains, fainting, fits, and was anemic and had his appendix removed. The disability that he was discharged for was gastric enteritis, and it was attributable to his service in France. Next, still in World War I, is Corporal John Buchan. I don't have a lot of information or photographs about John, but he was born on the 17th of July 1887 in Pyrmont, New South Wales, Australia. He was the son of the Reverend and Christian Buchan. He died on the 12th of October 1960 in Burwood, New South Wales. He was part of the 6th Machine Gun Company and served in France between 1916 and obviously not to the 2019 suggested in the graphic. The next document is from the Australian War Memorial titled The Sons of Reverend James Buchan and lists Captain William Buchan and his brothers Sergeant George Rutherford Buchan and Private John Buchan, all who volunteered between 1914 and 1916. The second of the sons of Reverend and Christian Buchan was Captain William Buchan, born on the 30th of December 1888 in Pyrmont, New South Wales, Australia, and died on the 25th of February 1945 in Sydney, Australia. He was part of the AIF 5th Pioneers. He was awarded the Military Cross and he served in both Anzac and France. There is a photograph of William with some of the other officers in his division. You'll also see a recommendation for him to receive the Military Cross, and it describes how William had carried out several reconnaissance missions both day and night in front of the line, that he had obtained the best route for communication to the trenches. He taped out the route for 2 trenches and personally guided the men and saw the trenches properly underway. The shell fire at this period over the whole of the front line was severe, and the enemy threw frequent barrages on the line with these trenches that he had to pass. The work required great courage and determination, especially in view of the fact that there was little protection. Buchan at all times has shown himself a gallant and conscientious officer. He displays great coolness under shell fire. He has not been off duty since joining the battalion in May 1916. And last but not least, the youngest child of Reverend James and Christian Buchan, Sergeant George Rutherford Buchan, born in 1893 in Pyrmont, New South Wales, killed in action on the 11th of April 1917 in France. He was both active in the Gallipoli Anzac Cove and in France. There is a video about Rutherford that goes into detail about his military service and his life before the war. Now to World War II. Signalman Roy Keith Lange, born 2 February 1919 in Buchan, New South Wales. Died 31 July 1991 in Dapto, New South Wales, Australia. He served in the Middle East, New Guinea and Pacific between 1941 and 1945. There is a picture of the Potential Officers Course in Duntroon in 1941 and a picture of him and his wife Isabel Buchan. Roy lived a long and fruitful life following the war. However, when the young men were soldiers, they were given cigarettes as part of their rations. Roy became addicted to the cigarettes and died from cigarette-related illness. Now to our only relative who isn't part of the Australian Armed Forces but part of the Polish Armed Forces, Joseph Forjasz. It's recorded there that he's a marksman. I'm not quite sure whether that's true because he did tell a story, one of the only stories that he told us about the war, where his horse stepped on a landmine and his horse didn't survive, but he did. Joseph was born on the 22nd of February 1915 in Poland and died on the 3rd of April 1997 in Blacktown, New South Wales. He was a Polish prisoner of war in Germany. Whilst his camp was recorded as a death camp, he was lucky as a Roman Catholic Pole that he was put to work, and his work papers are contained here. Following the war, he and his wife were displaced persons, and they and their daughter immigrated to Australia. Next is Flight Lieutenant Thomas Watson Woods, who was born on the 8th of October 1920 at Burwood, New South Wales, who was serving in the RAAF at the No. 2 Operational Unit. He was killed in action on the 8th of February 1945 at Mildura, Victoria, and he's seen pictured here with his daughter, Pamela. I do have a video that is due to come up soon about Thomas Watson Wood, his life and his time during the military. Flying Officer Howard James Buchan was born on the 22nd of March 1923 in Hurstville, New South Wales, Australia. He too was part of the RAAF between the 5th of December 1942 and the 15th of October 1945. He died in Adelaide on the 11th of September 1996. He lived a long and fruitful life and became the registrar at Flinders University. Okay, now to some people that I don't have a lot of photographs of. Firstly, Private Edmund Manning Perrin, who was born on the 16th of July 1906 at Leichhardt, New South Wales, and who died on the 7th of July 1970 in Maroubra, New South Wales. He was part of the 8th Battalion Defence Corps and dealt with the evacuation plan for Sydney if Australia was attacked. Sergeant John Hastings Perrin, who was born on the 14th of May 1914 at Leichhardt, New South Wales, who died on the 15th of May 1991 in Tweed Head, New South Wales, who served in New Guinea between 1942 and 1945. Corporal Colin Harry Perrin, born 20 November 1916, Sydney, Australia, died 1 September 1995, Lismore, New South Wales, Australia, part of the Advanced Land Headquarters from 1941 to 1946. Next, the first of two twins who served from the same family, Warrant Officer Alan Henry Rhymes, born 11 May 1915, Carlton, New South Wales. Died 7 September 2008 in Tugon, Queensland, Australia. He was a part of the RAA 2/3 Flash Spotting Battery and served in Syria and Lebanon. He was in the same unit as his cousin Bill Buchan, who served in Western Australia. The second of our twins, Warrant Officer George Rutherford Rhymes, born 11 May 1915 in Carlton, New South Wales, died 28 May 1995 in Wadden, ACT, Australia. He was part of the 25th Squadron of the RAAF and was based in Darwin. He's pictured here with his wife. It should be noted that George Rutherford Rhymes was named after his uncle, George Rutherford Buchan, who was killed in action in World War I. George was not the only person who was named after George Rutherford Buchan. A number of relatives who are named after Rudd are included in this video, and I wonder whether or not they felt the weight of being named after somebody who'd been killed in action in World War I. Next is Flying Officer Albert John Rhymes, born 9 April 1917 in Carlton, New South Wales. Died 28 March 1990 in Wenamble, New South Wales. He was part of the 31st Squadron RAAF gunner, and he served in Canada, New Guinea, Sierra Leone and India between 1941 and 1945. Now Flight Lieutenant James Daniel Rhymes, born 6 November 1912 at Carlton, New South Wales. Died 14 September 1993 in Sydney, Australia. Served between 1930 and 1946 because he was a volunteer prior to that. He was part of the 7th Squadron RAAF, who went to New Guinea and served at the Central Flying School. Gunner William Buchan, born 30 March 1916 in Sydney, Australia. Died 14 January 1979, Sydney. Went to the Middle East between 1940 and 1945, was part of the RAA Flash Spotting Battery with his cousin Alan Rhymes, both of which who met their wives in Western Australia when they were posted there. Private James Rutherford Buchan, born 23 October 1920 in Glebe, New South Wales, was part of the Volunteer Defence prior to the war, served in Papua New Guinea and died on the 3rd of September 2002 at Kincumber, New South Wales, Australia. The only female family member that I know that served in World War II, and unfortunately I only have a photograph of her when she was a baby. Corporal Margaret Buchan, born 22 July 1922 at Narandra, New South Wales. Died 2 May 1977 at Lismore, New South Wales. Was part of the 2nd Australian Imperial Force and served in the Pacific. And last but certainly not least, Private David Sinclair Buchan, born 18 June 1923 in Sydney and died 17 June 1988 in New South Wales, Australia. He was part of the pioneers that went to New Guinea and Borneo between 1942 and 1946. Unfortunately, I don't even have a photograph of David to share with you. Thank you for taking the time to come on this journey with me to remember and give tribute to those who have given their lives for us, lest we forget.